morning, depending on when you're watching / listening. Welcome to Ottawa. Welcome to the World Junior Hockey Championships. Welcome to FANFEST, and welcome to the program to kick it off. As someone who just saw a exciting for maybe a period and a half game between Slovakia and Sweden, Steven Ellis. We're going to get into what we're about to see in this tournament, and today we're going to talk a lot about the Detroit Red Wings, prospects and new coaches. Today, Derek Lalonde loses his job, fired officially by the Detroit Red Wings. Todd McLellan takes over. He will be behind the bench tomorrow as the Red Wings welcome to Detroit the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jason York from the Coming In Hot podcast will be aboard here in a little bit. In the meantime, before we get to NHL Detroit, let's talk a little bit, Steven, about prospect Detroit and Axel Sandin Pellikka with the hat trick. Kind of a little bit of a scare for Sweden in the opening game. They win 5-2 over Slovakia, but it was kind of a bumpy road getting there early. By the way, welcome to Ottawa.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I love Ottawa. This is a great city. When it comes to Sweden, that first period was not good. They seemed to be shooting more from the point, shooting from the corners, just weren't getting anything done. Slovakia's goaltender, Samuel Urban, looked really good. It wasn't until Axel Sandin Pellikka really started to figure it out and started shooting the puck that it worked out. He gets a hat trick. He assisted on another goal. He was all over the place. It wasn't his shot that was most impressive because that second goal was a little weak. It was actually his physicality that really impressed me. Behind the net, in the offensive zone, this is a player that was sacrificing the body whenever he needed to go out there and create plays. And hard to beat a 4-point first game.
4-point first game. Big win for Sweden, as expected. I want to sort of handicap the entire tournament. As we speak right now, if you're watching us live, James Higgins has the goal. That's a name you're going to hear a lot of. USA leading Germany 1-0. We will get on the USA page and what this tournament could mean for draft-eligible players. We've seen, I can remember Eric Johnson once upon a time with Team USA. This tournament really helped propel him to number one overall status. But before we get there, Team Canada. And we're going to watch Canada a little bit later on this evening. They'll face off against the Finns. It's their home country. It's their home fans. But are they the favorites in this tournament, or could we be looking at a USA repeat?
A lot of people are pointing in USA's favor here. I'm saying I think people are underestimating Canada's scoring depth here. Carson Rakoff is not playing for Canada tonight, his first game. He had 50 goals in the OHL last year. He could do 50 again this year. If you're able to sit a guy like that and then not even bring Michael Misa to a tournament like this, who's going to have close to 70 goals in the OHL, Zane Parekh, everything he does, I think people are underestimating just how good off Canada is with the puck. The pre-tournament, a bit of a feeling out process, especially in that game against Sweden where they struggled. Yeah. Czechia, it almost felt like they were checked out. They were just kind of ready for Christmas at that point. I'm still putting my money on Canada. United States, I think the big thing here is how good is Trey Augustine going to be? Is he going to be the X factor? I think so. He's the best goalie in this tournament. So far, he hasn't been very busy against Germany, but that's a team that's got a lot of experience. They know how to win.
So here's how I look at this, because I think a lot of us are crossing our fingers. We've talked so much about the future, the present of international hockey is Canada versus the United States. Yeah. Previous it was Canada versus the Soviet Union, Russia, but now it seems as if the matchup that everybody dreams about is Canada and the United States. Am I looking at this too simply? The USA has maybe the best goaltender in Trey Augustine, the best defenseman in Z Boyum, the best line in Leonard, Higgins, and Perreault, but Canada has the depth. Is that the way you would handicap these two squads?
100%. I feel like this is a situation here where if Cole Eiserman's not scoring for the Americans, if Trevor Connolly's not producing for the Americans, you're putting a lot more pressure on a guy like Oliver Moore to do all the rest of the work, and then you've got a lot more defensive forwards. That's the thing about this American team. While Canada, it's a bit more of a skill team, the American team's got a bunch of bottom six guys that know how to play bottom six roles better than anybody else. Right. That's where they're going to beat them. Scoring depth, I'm still giving that to Canada.
Let's drill down on a couple of players specifically. And listen, you and I talk so much about prospects and what this tournament could mean for someone's draft stock, etc. Matthew Schaefer is someone who's been turning heads. We're going to hear a lot about James Higgins. We're going to hear a lot about Porter Martone, etc. How much can this tournament, like this one specifically in Ottawa, do for some of the high-end guys? Or is the cement starting to harden around draft positions? Essentially, is it fluid? or do we know where guys are going to go?
It's very fluid. Like, this is one where if you throw Michael Misa into the mix, obviously not at this tournament, you've got 4 legitimate candidates for number 1. And then you got Victor Eklund on Sweden, who is a potential top 5 prospect for this year. In a tournament like this, it's a small sample size, right? Like, it's a 7-game sample. We've seen a lot of sample sizes for these guys, different points of the season. For someone like James Hagen specifically, this could be what puts him back in the first overall conversation, because a lot of people, a lot of scouts, a lot of teams don't think he's number 1 anymore. A dominant tournament, and he's already off to a great start, as we've seen, could really propel him back into that conversation for number 1. But I think if this one is, of all the drafts that I've covered, this feels like one that's going to end up going to the wire. Like, it could be whatever that team that picks first just truly likes a bit more, instead of a Macklin Celebrini to clear number 1. Yeah. Connor Bedard is number 1.
Does it kind of have a Montreal, Slavkovsky, Cooley, Nemec, Wright, to a certain extent David Juracek as well? Does it have that kind of feel to it? Like, we're not going to know until we get there who's going number 1. And it's not even going to be like a 2010 Taylor Tyler. It's going to be 3 or 4 guys, and maybe even 5.
Yeah, like, it's been a while since we've seen that. Like, I'd say it's almost better on the high end than what we saw in 22, because it felt like every player there was trying their hardest to find a way to not be taken first overall. Through, it was in the wake of COVID and everything, and a lot of those guys missed a lot of time. With this, like, everyone's finding new ways to thrive. Like, you look at Martone, he looks like a Matthew Tkachuk player out there. Yeah. Matthew Schaefer, you see some of the same qualities that makes Cale Makar and Adam Fox so good. Then you look at Michael Misa, trying to set like a scoring record in the last 20 years in the OHL. And then James Hagens is one of the best 2-way centers I think we've seen in a long time. Like, this is a situation here where there's 4 players putting up an incredible argument to the number 1. We're going to see 3 of them here. They're all going to play pretty key roles here, but none more than I would assume James Hagens is the number 1 center for USA.
We always say whichever team has the best / most 19-year-olds tends to do well and generally win this tournament. USA is returning 10 players from the gold medal team from last year. But I'm real curious to see Gavin McKenna and see what he can do. We've seen players like this before start as the extra forward, and then by the time the tournament's done, they're close to smashing records, and they're playing 90 seconds on every power play, and they're playing on the top line. Listen, every tournament we've seen Gavin McKenna play in, every game we've seen him play in the Western Hockey League, this guy is like, if you compare it to a hurdler, he's not just skimming the top of the hurdle. He's like leaping over it with space to spare. Like, every single hurdle you put in front of him, he leaps over it, no problem. What do you expect, though, in this one? This is like the finest collection of 19-year-old hockey players, no Russia, in the world competing against Gavin McKenna. How good can this guy be?
I don't think it's going to be Connor Bedard 23 levels of incredible, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 20 points in this tournament. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's the top scorer overall. Like, what we saw in the pre-tournament was a player that the more comfortable he got, the more dominant he got. The U18s, and I'll give a free coaching tip here to Dave Cameron, put him with Porter Martone. We saw what they did at the U18s. Throw in Berkeley Cat in there. Yeah. That line is going to be scary good if you make that happen. But when it comes to McKenna, no player has got the pure skill that he has, the way he moves the puck, the way he thinks the game. Like, this is an elite level talent. I hate using the word elite to describe a prospect. I didn't even want to use that to describe Macklin Celebrini last year, because you got to be the best of the best. Gavin McKenna is an elite prospect, and he's going to be a superstar. And this is going to be where he shows just how good he is to the whole hockey world.
Okay, so you just gave out a coaching tip. I'm going to give out a trainer tip. All you trainers out there, Steven just talked about the word elite. We're on to you. We know that if you put elite in your description for your program, that's just a way to add a 20 or 30 extra dollars to the session. We're on to you. We know when you say elite, it just means give me an extra 20 or 30 dollars. But I digress. When you look at Canada and we look at the Canadian blue line, I want to get further thoughts on Matthew Schaefer. I want to get some thoughts on Tanner Mollendijk as well. Some thoughts on Bonk. When you look at this back end, I mean, this is the back end that's got to contain with that BC line from the United States. How does this blue line look for Canada?
I think the one thing that they're truly missing is a Brant Clark guy that could go out there and just dominate with the puck. You've got a lot of guys who could do a lot of great things with it. Matthew Schaefer, obviously. Yeah. Tanner Molendijk, we expect to play a lot of key minutes. Sam Dickinson already feels like he's being underutilized. I think we're looking at him being a potential third-pairing defenseman on this team. But then you go out there and you look at guys like Bonk can be that two-way threat. Andrew Gibson's actually been really good offensively for a guy who doesn't score goals. His job is to go out there and block shots. Sawyer Minio, Caden Price, just guys that just get in the way. So maybe not an elite group defensively. Again, to use the word elite, I would say arguably defense is probably Canada's biggest weakness, but it's not a weakness because they do have a little bit of everything.
There are two defensemen, one Canada, one United States, that didn't make their teams that had a lot of people scratching their heads. For Canada, and sorry Calgary Flames fans, that's Zane Parekh. And for the United States, sorry Rangers fans, that's EJ Emery. Did those two kind of give you a what kind of feeling?
Emery specifically, yes. Like that just felt like at the very least, even if you had the worst, selection camp possible, which it was 2 days of practices. I was there, I can tell you. Yeah. Not exactly a lot to go by. Even if he played horrible, the fact that just on merit, he played so good with Cole Hudson last year at the U18 level, you'd want to keep those two together. So I was surprised there. With Parekh, obviously a late addition to the team. I thought he should have been a training camp to begin with. But then he didn't play well in those selection camp games. As simple as that. He was good in that scrimmage against Canada, but then when they switched to the U Sports games, he wasn't very good. And I feel like that really hurt him there, and they're probably going to miss him. But you're competing against everyone else in the same environment and you don't show up, that hurts.
Go-to guys. We always wonder who the go-to guy is going to be. For Canada, is that going to be, pay attention Maple Leafs fans, Easton Cowan?
The way the pre-tournament looked, 100%. Easton Cowan should be there. Playing with Kyle Ritchie and Bradley Nadeau, two guys with NHL experience. And those three just seem to be clicking right off the bat for three guys that have never really played together before. I think that's really good. I'll throw one other name out there. Okay. Cole Beaudoin. Not a guy that's going to be playing high in the lineup.
He's so strong, physical, very Colts.
I would say outside of maybe Easton Cowan and maybe Gavin McKenna, the most impressive forward since the selection camp, has to be Cole Beaudoin. And so people would ask you, why is this guy on the team? He doesn't score a lot of points. He hits everybody, like you said. Very difficult to play against. He's so energetic, and he's great defensively. You put that all together, and you've got a guy that is extremely valuable, and you need him.
So that's an interesting point that you've got us to here. So Dave Cameron is a veteran, NHL, OHL veteran coach. He's an old school guy.
Yeah.
Do we expect to see that from Canada? I'm not saying old school, it's going to be. I do anyway. When I hear he coaches old school, I tend to think table hockey, and everybody's got their lane, and that's it. And if your stick can't touch the boards, you're out of position if you're a winger. So I don't mean it like that, but do we see more of an old school straight line approach from Canada in this tournament because Dave Cameron's behind the bench?
There's a lot of really talented players there that I feel like in the selection camp and then again at the pre-tournament games, maybe weren't using every bit of skill that they could have. We weren't seeing Easton Cowan flashing some great moves. We weren't seeing Cal Ritchie going out there and making defensemen look silly. It feels like his message here is to keep things simple. Be smart. Don't make mistakes. It'll be interesting to see what happens if he kind of lets these guys just go wild and see what happens because they got the skill to go out there and do so much with the puck, especially Gavin McKenna. But, I will say, very physical group. A lot of guys who know how to hit guys, who knows how to play defensive and play tough. I think that's an underrated aspect of this group.
Quick question from the chat here on this Boxing Day in Ottawa in advance of the World Junior Hockey Championships. The first game's already out of the way right now. USA is playing Germany. Mark Carvalho submits this one. Why is Michael Misa not at this tournament?
Great question. I think everybody would love to know that one. When it comes to Misa, it felt like there were other guys that were going to play top six roles that would have made him almost a bit redundant. And that's my best way of explaining it because he's the best goal scorer in the CHL. Why would you not want him there? But they have a lot of other guys who could do that are maybe a bit better defensively, a bit stronger. He's a big guy, but if you need a guy to be a physical presence out there, you throw a guy like Cole Beaudoin out there, you throw a guy like Ethan Gauthier. For him not to be invited to camp, I think was a mistake. He should be on this team. Mm-hmm. I've tried to convince myself why they did it, and I can't convince myself, to be honest.
If Canada doesn't win gold, and USA looks great, if Canada doesn't win gold, will Michael Misa be the person that everyone points to and says, That's why Canada do, and maybe say the same thing about Zane Parekh too, but more specifically, Michael Misa. That's the reason Canada didn't win gold.
I'd say so, 100%. I think Michael Misa should have been at camp, should have been there. Like, again, any projection, a roster, anything you look, everyone was looking at Michael Misa for a reason because this guy could shoot the puck. And I've been saying it time after time this year. You know, he might not go out there and be the play driver every night, but he's always in the right spot to finish. And what's the hardest thing to do in hockey? Score goals. He's good at it.
That's how you make your money, folks. You make your money scoring goals, not back checking. The coaches do love those back checkers. There's a couple of players, one Cal Ritchie you mentioned, and also Bradley Nadeau. Casual fans may not know them. One of the wonderful things about the World Juniors is you get to know the players that are this close to joining your NHL team full time. Ritchie with Colorado, Nadeau with the Carolina Hurricanes. What should people know about them?
Well, Cal Ritchie, that's a guy that I've seen from a very young age because he's from Oakville. I'm from Oakville. I saw him growing up, and speaker's going off. But when it comes to Ritchie, unbelievable two-way threat. Like, this is a player that I remember watching at 14, 15, and the big thing about him was he could drive the net, make these great plays with the puck, and score a lot. But when he got to Oshawa, it became clear he needed to do more than score to become the overall threat that he could become. And now we're seeing one of the best 200-foot forwards, I think, outside the NHL right now. I wish he played a better role in the NHL. I wish he got an opportunity to play a bunch of, key moments for the Avalanche because I think he would have been able to thrive there. But we're seeing some.
That's a tough top six to crack.
Oh, for sure. But remember,
if you're going to crack it, it's not as if, with all due respect, Anaheim, Columbus, Buffalo, he's not walking in it's Colorado Avalanche.
It was also a team that the reason he made it was because there were so many injuries to begin with.
Yeah.
He could have gone out there and played some power play. That's just my opinion. But when you come to Bradley Nadeau, that's a guy who's just so smart. That's the thing. His hockey brain is so good. He was a star player in the BCHL. It's hard to become a BCHL first-round player to go to the NHL, but as quick as he did, he went to college, he was awesome, looked great, played his NHL debut last year, having a very good year in the AHL this year. That's a guy that could be playing full-time in the NHL in a year or two because, again, just so smart.
All right, so Colby Cohen from Morning Cup of Hockey texted me this one. A couple of things. Tell Ellis Celebrini was an elite prospect and also Canadian prospect homer. So we'll shift gears then from Canada to the United States. And we started off by talking about Trey Augustine. You mentioned the goaltender. We've seen some great goalie performances. John Gibson comes to mind right away from USA goaltenders. Trey Augustine is special. Red Wings, you have a new coach, and this guy's going to be your starting goaltender somewhere down the road. Quick thought on Trey Augustine here. This is not his first tournament, Steven.
I've interviewed him many times over the years, and that when I first talked to him, he was a bit more reserved, a bit more quiet, almost nervous to a sense, but you could tell that was a guy who's, again, just so dialed in, so focused, nothing bothers him. And then you see the most recent interview, and he's making jokes, he's having a good time. This guy is coming with so much confidence right now. And, as a goalie myself, not a good goalie, but as a goalie, the one thing that can drown you is if you're not confident in yourself. He's got it in spades. He's got a great glove hand, not a big goalie, but he's easily the best goalie in this draft. A top 5 goalie prospect in the world right now. But given how many other top goalie prospects have become full-time NHLers, Dustin Wolf, Wolfsted's not far away. We could be talking about Augustine being the undisputed number 1 goalie prospect this time next year.
When you mention confidence and having a swagger and carrying yourself like you're the king of the tournament. Listen, speaking of Colby Cohen, him and Johnny Lazarus are always talking about Ryan Leonard, and for good reason. I look at him and I say, what are you still doing in college? You talk about making the jump to the NHL. This guy should be playing on the Washington Capitals. I know he's come back for unfinished business, etc. But when you look at Ryan Leonard, I want to go through all three on that line. Do you not look at him and say, what are you doing here?
He should be in the NHL, and I'd say the same for Gabe Perreault. If James Haggins was a little bit older, I'd say the same thing, and the same thing with Z Buium. When it comes to what Leonard does, I remember watching him a lot at the U18 level and was just he was able to finish plays. He was driving the net. He was a power forward style guy, and he's just taken it to a totally new level. It's I made an argument that Leonard didn't even need college to begin with. He could have gone straight to the NHL because a player that does so many things as well as he does, who can play the wing, he does some experience at center, but can go out there and just play with anyone and look good. And I know that's ironic given he's typically played the same line mates almost his entire career. But he can go out there, play in any role, in any situation, and look good. We saw him in the World Championship, didn't play a lot, but he was good there when he was on the ice. And it's because he's so competitive. That player wants the puck at all times.
Yeah.
You see the results. He could be playing with Alex Ovechkin by the end of this season.
You know, it's funny, too. When I think about Ryan Leonard and I think about his draft, Philadelphia and Washington were picking right beside each other. And it's almost as if each team went out of their way not to take their stereotypical draft pick. Because if I went in and go to that draft and said, okay, one of these two teams, Philadelphia or Washington, is going to take Matvei Michkov, and one's going to take hulking Ryan Leonard, which one do you think Washington would have picked, and which one do you think the big bad, the Broad Street bullies, the Philadelphia Flyers, would have selected?
I think I know what you're talking about there. Yeah, it's Leonard would have been an amazing player for the Flyers, but I think they're okay with who they got. Michkov's having a pretty good season.
I don't know. Hasn't scored in 5. He's looking for another health bomb. I don't know about you. Deal with Tortorella.
He should have scored that lacrosse goal against Detroit a few weeks ago.
You mentioned Gabriel Perreault. He's a Rangers prospect, one of their finest prospects in a pipeline that isn't exactly the deepest, folks, but nonetheless they have a good one there. Now, I remember another draft story. I remember watching the Nashville table when the Rangers took Gabriel Perreault. It was one before Nashville, and I was told that was the player that they ended up getting. Tanner Molenbeek was a wonderful defenseman, but that was the player that Nashville coveted. When, like, watching the Nashville tape, when the Rangers took Perreault, you just see all the shoulders of the table. Oh, and there may have been a few F-bombs around the table as well, and for good reason. This guy's outstanding.
Yeah, Gabe Perreault, I was one of the people who were very tough on his skating in his draft year because it felt like there was a lot of games where he didn't need to do a lot of skating. He would just stand there, take the pass from Ryan Leonard, take the pass from Will Smith. You know, yeah, he had great line mates, but you don't go out there and set a national team scoring record by accident. You don't go out there and beat Patrick Kane and Austin Matthews, Cole Caulfield, Jack Hughes by accident. And that's because he's always in the right spot. Again, to go back to another point there, but with him, his skating's not a problem for me anymore. I feel like it's at least good enough that when he goes to the NHL, it's not going to be an issue. He's going to be able to produce.
Right.
And another player I think that could have easily been in the NHL right now because he's always in the right spot. He's a good puck distributor. He's got a great shot. You can play him on the power play. All roles there. Absolute steal for the New York Rangers.
We talked about James Hagen's off the top, and that's the troika. That's the number one line. That'll be the number one line. Let's face it. In this tournament, will Gabe Perreault lead the tournament scoring? Will James Hagen lead the tournament scoring? Will Ryan Leonard? Odds are it's going to be one of those three. The question about USA is, do they have the depth? I mean, you look after that first line, Cole Yzerman certainly, Trevor Connolly, the Vegas pick as well. I do wonder what's happening down the middle, and I do wonder what's happening at the bottom of that roster. But before we get there, Yzerman and Connolly, what should we expect? And by the way, does Yzerman have the best shot in this tournament? He
does, and he got one of the best shots of any prospect outside of the NHL. Kasper Halttunen might say something differently from Finland, San Jose Sharks prospect. Yzerman, you watch him in warm-ups, and that's obviously can't take anything about a player's ability in warm-ups, but that is someone where if he doesn't score on a shot, he's taking 20 more shots to try and figure out how to get the best shot possible out there. He works so hard to perfect that, but he's a lot more than that. He's out there hitting guys. He's out there. Actually, I'd say he's a better playmaker than most people suggest. I was still very high on him. I think the Islanders, again, use the word steal like the Rangers, the Islanders stole him. It's unfair to the rest of the NHL that you guys let Cole Yzerman.
But is that because he had so many knocks on his game other than the shot?
It is, but I also don't know how much I subscribe to that. I feel like he was better defensively than people gave him credit for. He was out there throwing as hard of a hit as anyone. Not the world's greatest skater, but I feel like the stuff he brings to the table still should have pushed him at least higher than 20.
Okay.
But look him and you look at Trevor Connolly. They played together at the USA Top Prospects game last year. Instant chemistry. I really wish we could have seen those guys again together at the U18s last year when they called up Connolly to play. But, Connolly's a great puck distributor. Yzerman's got the great shot. You put those two guys together, that's a dominant second line pairing.
Anyone else we should pay attention to with USA before we move on here? I mean, we kind of hit a lot of the heavyweights. Anyone that really catches catches your eye?
Oliver Moore, for sure, the Chicago Blackhawks prospect, probably the best skater in this tournament. And, you know, if you want to go for more of a defensive defenseman, Drew Fortescue, a Rangers prospect. Returning player. Easy putting him there with Bouillon because they play together. They got a lot of chemistry. They know how to use each other's strengths and weaknesses together. Yeah. And I think that, you know, he might not be flashy, but he's good. Okay, over-under Z Bouillon in competitive games. Over-under 30 minutes. He's gonna get 28 minutes. I'm gonna go. I'll be a bit quieter there. I think they got to give some ice to Cole Hudson too there. Very good. Okay, so quick little poll right now in our chat. Who's winning tonight? Canada, Finland. 78%. 78% Canada. 22% Finland on this one. There has to be an upset somewhere here. Maybe a period and a half. I got a text from Steven about, you know, goaltenders standing on their heads in the Slovakia-Sweden game, and then Sweden tilted the rink. If you're looking for a spoiler in this tournament, if you're looking for someone that can change things around, shake things up, who could it be? And could it be Finland? It could be Finland, but we kind of expect them to do well. Although, like, the one thing is, Finland typically plays really good hockey against Canada, no matter the level. I know they lost today, but I'm still giving Slovakia a bit of love here. I think if that's a team that can actually figure out how to shoot the puck and have guys more than just Dalibor Dvorsky try to generate offense, Slovakia could be this potential medal candidate. I will point out that they looked really bad at the beginning of the U18s 2 years ago with a lot of this same group. They played for bronze, 1 goal away from beating Canada for that medal. Last year, they almost got sent to the relegation round. Yeah. They lost the bronze medal game. So these are guys that have a lot of losing experience, but a lot of experience of showing up when they need to. And that's a team that I would not want to play in the quarterfinals. How long do you have? Do you have a little bit longer? Whatever you want. New York was going to come, but for various reasons can't make it. You got a little bit of time? Let's do it. Okay, Johnny Lazarus sends in this one. Interviewed Oliver Moore after he was drafted. Here's the quote. I just got drafted to the same team as Connor Bedard. That's so sick. You know, one of the things that... I'd say that too. One of the things that I kind of love about this tournament, it's one of the reasons why I love junior hockey, I love college hockey, all of it. It always seems to be as if it's the last, there's still like a glimpse of innocence with a lot of players. Yeah. I know even by now it is sort of business oriented, but it's that sort of last glimpse. My personal theory why you see a lot of NHL players go back and buy junior teams is because it's a time when hockey was fun and not just the business. Like, part of this tournament is, as much as we make it to be like a be-all and end-all, really, first of all, it's a development tournament. It's how the players look around their peers. And from the players, sure, it's a lot of stress. And sure, look, TSN's done a wonderful job with this thing. In Canada, everything's wrapped in a flag and maple syrup poured all over it. It's heartstrings at Christmas time and the kids and all that, and noogies in the parking lot. But a lot of this, too, is there's still, and you saw that with that Moore comment at the draft, there's still like a glint of optimism. Like, all the fun hasn't been sucked out of it for the kids yet. Well, that's the thing. It's like, you know, this is not the only big international hockey tournament for prospects. We've got the U18s, U17s, all these other events. But for a lot of guys, this might be the last time they ever represent their country. Or it might be the last time they ever play with players that they grew up playing with since they were kids. And that's what kind of makes these stories really fun. Like, this isn't just a bunch of players thrown together for one tournament. Like, these are guys that, in a lot of cases, there's special connections that just make it so much fun. When you look at, you know, the excitement of this tournament and how important it is for so many players growing up, when they score a goal. Axel Sandin-Pellikka, every goal he scored today, he celebrated like he was playing in the gold medal game. That's awesome. I know the even that third goal, that lazy wrist shot from the point. It's fine. You know, it's fine. The thing I'll say about when it comes to this tournament is, like, I know a lot of people say, like, oh, celebrate like you've done it before. No. Hockey's a fun game. Go have fun. You want the players to be excited. You want the fans to be excited. You want the kids watching to be excited and think, this is cool. Yeah. Like, one of my favorite memories growing up from watching all those great World Junior games was the 2009 World Juniors. Obviously, it makes sense that we're here. Yeah. But that game against Canada-USA, where they were taunting each other at the bench. Yeah, it's great. You know, the excitement from that, the Tokarski save, everything like that, those moments are what makes a tournament like this so special, because there's so much emotion on the line here that you just kind of lose when you get these guys playing, you know, pro players playing, like, okay, it's another game for me. But these guys, it might be the last major time they ever play for their country. It's great. The crest tugging. Yeah.
is where, and now that's a standard everywhere.
Remember, it was the U.S. team that brought out like the garbage can with like the Team Canada logo out a couple years ago. I thought that was hilarious, and like Cutter Gauthier being like the enemy of everybody. Like, I love that. Like, let's find these more villains. It's fun. This is hockey.
Question from the chat. Doogie says, "How good can Eklund be?"
William Eklund, or Victor Eklund, sorry. Seeing him play top six was a guy that, like, it's a position born for him because he's so competitive. He's got a great shot. You could put him on the power play. And today he didn't score, but I did feel like he was one of Sweden's better players because he brought so much energy. He hit everybody that moved. But in that competitive nature, that nonstop motor, you put that together with the ability to put pucks in the net. Like, I expect him to be one of Sweden's better players in this tournament for a team that's missing someone like Jonathan Lekkerimäki to go out there and score.
Also, here's one from Quaddy. Remember Ovechkin fist pumping on a breakaway empty netter?
See, I love
was that the Halifax tournament? Was that Halifax?
That sounds like it, yeah. See, like, again, things like that are great. It's kind of why, like, hot take. I love the Ridley Gregg slap shot breakaway goal. It's funny.
I loved it too.
It's like, again, like, let's why not just let's have fun with it. I want to see Can USA. I want to see nastiness, not going out there and killing each other, but I want two teams that don't like each other going out there, knowing that that's probably going to be what decides the winner of Group A, which matters for the playoffs.
Again, no matter what conversation we have at the World Juniors, it'll swing back to Canada versus USA. We're going to see him on New Year's Eve. We hope we see him in the final as well. Who's going to be out there? You're Dave Cameron. Who do you put out there against the BC line? Who's out there against Leonard, Perreault, and James Higgins?
Andrew Gibson should, because Gibson is looking really good right now.
Yeah.
You want him going out there throwing hits. When you want to match a line forward-wise, like, I don't know. You got to get guys out there to make them have to move around the ice. Someone like a Cole Baudouin, a guy like Matthew Cataford, and might not be the flashiest players out there, but make them move. Make them have to be creative because they're so dangerous when they're out there on the power play, standing still, passing to each other. Make them so they have to work that extra level to make those passes. And I think Canada, the only team in that group that can make that happen.
I didn't really ask you much other than Axel Sandin Pellikka. And maybe it wasn't a great game to pull any solid information out of. But what did you make of Sweden this afternoon? It's a game that they're expected to win.
Yep.
Listen, I got excited too when Dalibor Dvorsky scored the St. Louis Blues draft pick. I'm like, ooh, hold on a second here. We got some spice early in the tournament. But are you able to pull anything out of that game for Sweden?
First off, I feel like this is Dalibor Dvorsky's 40th World Juniors.
It's fourth, right?
Yeah, but it feels like he's been in a million.
Every year, Dalibor Dvorsky's.
Yeah. This is going to be the Dalibor Dvorsky Cup next year for the 50th anniversary. But no, when it comes to Sweden, I think I saw them a couple days ago play against Germany. It was like an 11-1 game, not really competitive.
Yeah.
My biggest gripes about that team early on was they were trying too much on the power play. They were trying to just pass the puck, see what happens, and eventually it worked out. But when they started simplifying it and started using that blue line, because it is a good blue line to go out there and generate offense, it worked. And that was the thing. In that pre-tournament game, Tom Wielander scored. Rasmus Bergqvist, the Habs prospect, scored. Axel Sandin Pellikka did a lot. Like, that's a group that when everything's working well and they're passing the blue line, that's just two extra guys who know how to score, probably better than any other blue line on this team in this tournament. And that's why you saw 4 of those 5 goals today coming from blue liners. So it'll be interesting to see which Swedish players go out there up front and generate. Like, you need Otto Stenberg to score. Yeah. You need Anton Wahlberg to do that. But the good sign is that the blue liners are getting the job done at least.
So we talked about with Leonard, Perreault, and Higgins draft eligible, but they could be playing in the NHL. Who on that Sweden team, and I'm going to nudge you right towards Pellikka. It's a Detroit Red Wings day. Derek Lalonde is along with the coach. Tom McClellan is in, etc. Trey Augustine's going to be a star of the tournament. How close is Pellikka to being an NHLer?
I don't know his contract status, but I won't be surprised if he's in the NHL next year. And I think
it's Detroit though. You start in GR. You always start in Grand Rapids.
But I think, man, he should put up an argument there. Like, for me, obviously a different player than, let's say, Simon Edvinsson a couple of years ago. Yep. But when it comes to ASP, I was very concerned with how often he gave the puck away in his draft year. A guy that was willing to rush the puck up and do great things with it, but would try to get too fancy. I feel like he simplified his game, And by simplifying, he's just better offensively because he's not going out there and just throwing the puck away. He's making the right plays, and his shot is as good as I've seen. He should be in the NHL pretty soon. Like, that's what I like. Again, I know Detroit's kind of development path here, and that's not a bad thing at all, but I don't want to watch him at Coca-Cola Coliseum when they're playing the Marlies next year. I want to see him when they're visiting at Scotiabank Arena.
I'm always curious about who needs to have big tournaments. And listen, the draft eligible is always they'll get, okay, what's going through Schaefer's mind, Hagen's mind, etc. Porter Martone. I'll look at players that have been drafted that need a push in their season. I think about Michael Hrabal. I can recall him, and I'm sure you have the same. Like getting reports like this guy's going to be the best player, the best goalie in the draft, best goalie in the draft, playing in the USHL, UMass. First of all, where are you at on Michael Hrabal? And how much does this guy need a really good tournament?
So I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning, and I kid you not, thinking about Michael Hrabal was legitimately the first thing on my mind this morning.
You woke up thinking about Michael Hrabal? People tell me to get a life.
Well, I'm like thinking, man, like this guy needs to have a good tournament. And no, I agree. There's so much potential there. Like every team wants a 6'6" goalie, right? But it's a goalie that seems like he was unsure of how to play to his giant frame, and that really hurt him last year. A lot of goals down low that just are so odd for a goalie his size. Yeah. But watching him in college this year, it feels like he's a lot more focused. He doesn't let bad goals bother him anymore. Like last year, you'd see him allow a goal and he's smashing his stick. He's mad. That doesn't happen anymore. It feels like he's more focused. Other than that goal where he was backwards against Canada a few days ago and looking the wrong way, which don't do that against Gavin McKenna because McKenna will make you pay. Yeah. I thought he looked excellent. And you just need him to be like, my opinions on him are a lot weaker than they were at his draft year. But this is a tournament where he could go out there and really prove himself and show, like, you know what, I can do it. I can get the job done. I'm a future NHL star goalie. If not, he's a Utah prospect. Melker Thelen was Sweden's goalie today. He's a Utah prospect. Who
else do you think needs to have a big tournament?
I would like to see Samuel Urban have a very impressive tournament, do this Adam Gaillon thing, and become, this next overage goalie drafted to the NHL, because I've watched him in a lot of international tournaments, and outside of last year where he got shelled in his one game, I thought that he's always found a way to give Slovakia a chance. He's not big. I think he's listed as 6'1" now. He was 6 foot at the U18s, but his glove hand is maybe one of the best in this tournament. Very athletic, having a solid season in the USHL. I would love to see him play well enough to not only give Slovakia a chance, but to earn a spot on the NHL draft this year.
Johnny Lazarus, who's doing part-time production of the show today.
Thank you, Johnny.
And we thank him for it. Greg Carville has raved about how much Michael Hrabal has matured this year. If anyone's going to know, it's Laz.
Yeah.
For the obvious reasons.
And I believe it. Like, that's a guy that, watching him, even when he let that goal backwards, it didn't seem to bother him. He was ready to go. He looked focused. He was always energetic. And he is the X factor for Czechia. Like, when you look at the United States, like, if Trey Augustine completely falls apart, that's gonna be bad for the Czechs. I don't think they're contending for a medal if Hrabal's not playing at his peak performance.
Okay, but here's the thing: if Hrabal's playing at that level, do they have a shot at being that team?
So we saw that game against Canada where they, at least in the middle of the game, they really forced Canada to play from the outside, and there's been a lot of question marks about how they put this team together. Dominik Bajdenka is their best prospect. They didn't bring him to the team. Radim Mrka is a potential top 15 prospect in the NHL draft this year. They didn't bring him. They obviously didn't bring drawing a blank on that really small player, Adam Benok, another guy that probably should be on the team given how good he plays whenever he plays for Czechia. They don't. If Edward Shala is not performing up front, they don't have a guy who can go out there and perform.
Do you like him?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm so torn on him. When he's great, he's great.
Can we pause on? Yeah. I love the skill, but when the skill is that soft, and I hate saying this about a young player, but here we go. When the skill is that soft, I say to myself, I don't know, you can have all the skill in the world. Give me something. Give me some bite. Like at the 200 by 85, there's nowhere to hide out there. And you saw that when he came over to North America.
I think I wrote in my scouting report on him in his draft year was he'd be a really good bandy player. He would love that extra 50,000 feet of ice because he could do great things in open ice. But in a tournament like this, smaller ice, he's going to get pushed around. He's having a good year in the AHL. I think in Coachella Valley, like the numbers are good, the performances are good. But Coachella Valley has also shown they can develop everybody because they've made it to the finals in both of their years of existence. I think with him, he's got to be able to take over. I thought he actually was very good defensively in the game against Canada, but we'll have to see just kind of how much of a complete player he could be because, I don't know, I'm not convinced.
Okay, I think I know where this answer is going to go. I'm just gonna start counting in my head and see how long it takes Steven to get there. This from Richard Chung. How good is Canadian goaltending this year?
Not as good as the United States. Are we going better than last year?
I'm waiting for one name.
Well, Jack Avakovic is great.
11 seconds.
Okay.
11 seconds to the Brampton goalie.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go right away. Avakovic is going to get the starting gig.
He won't, unfortunately, but he should. I'd say when it comes to Canada, like Carter George, he had a couple of weaker goals against Czechia, but he's been outstanding for Owen Sound this year. He even scored a goal. So if Canada needs a late goal, throw to Carter George.
Power play.
He'll probably be the starting goalie in next year's World Juniors too, unless Jack Avakovic has something to say about that. I love him, man. I know he's smaller. He's 5'11". His dad, I believe, is 6'4". So there is hope that maybe he'll grow to be that size. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to him, like so competitive, not great stats in Brampton, but I watched him in Brampton. I remember it was the first game of the year. They won 8-0, but it felt like despite winning that, the Brantford Bulldogs had more high quality scoring chances. Because Brampton's defense just is not great. Yeah. Very competitive, skilled goaltender. Just lot to love him there, just not big. But we saw him at the Linka Gretzky, one of the best goalie performances I've ever seen in that tournament. Yeah. The fact that he's starting the tournament as a backup shows you how confident they are in him. And I will say, as much as I also like Carson Bjarnason, the two goalies that have been best ever since that initial scrimmage at selection camp are the two goalies that are going to be addressing tonight.
All right, that is tonight. Canada faces off against Finland. I'm going to spend a couple of more moments here before we get going, so we got to get a game to get to. If you have any questions in the chat, send them in. In the meantime, this is day one of the FanFest, and one of the things, so as I walked in a couple hours before the FanFest started, the one thing I wanted to go check out was a synthetic ice, and some teams going to be practicing on there. And I saw a number of goaltenders practicing on there. The one thing that I believe Hockey Canada is looking at is, given the cost of ice is ridiculous, $4, $5, $6, $7, $800 for an hour of ice. No one's suggesting we play games on this yet, but as far as development, as far as practices, as far as providing some financial relief for parents, for teams, etc., synthetic ice is at a place where you can play on it, you can practice on it. It's not exactly like ice, but it's getting there. Do you think, and this is sort of off the junior hockey page, specifically more onto the youth minor hockey page, do you think that there could be something there with synthetic ice being used as a complement to real ice as far as training goes? So you don't have to spend $800 a sheet every time you want to get your team playing together?
100%. I had a good discussion when I was at this major hockey event in the summer with Jamaica, Greece, Puerto Rico, and Lebanon.
Really?
And it was playing in Oshawa, Ontario. And I kind of talked to all the teams. Like, what's the big... Obviously, you guys don't have rinks. That's part of the issue. None of those teams have rinks. So what do you have to do to kind of go out there and make sure you can actually develop? Because without a rink, can't really play, right?
Yeah.
And they all said, like, we synthetic ice. And supposedly, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but what they were telling me is the technology of what makes synthetic ice as good as it is now is a lot better than it was 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And, well, fun fact, to kind of go off topic for a bit, but Puerto Rico, they played an NHL preseason game there back in 2006. Mm. The attendance was so bad that they actually just stopped playing hockey there. Hockey didn't happen. People that wanted to keep hockey alive started playing, like sneaking into this rink and playing in like the basement just so they had somewhere to play. Eventually, they were able to build their own rink. Then a hurricane destroyed it. Yeah. To my knowledge, I believe they rebuilt it. I'm not completely sure where they are at that status right now, but that's a group that really wants to play hockey. But talking to these teams, it's the synthetic ice gives them an opportunity to at least play and show to their federations or their government, like, hey, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to grow, because it's kind of a catch-22. You can't play without ice, and these governments aren't going to spend the money in these areas if you don't play, right? Like, so it's kind of a difficult thing, and it's so expensive. And I'm a big fan of things like ball hockey and roller hockey.
Oh, yeah.
And things like roller hockey. I wish that was a bigger thing. Like I remember the WHF used to have their own tournament there. I wish we saw that again. And you get some good players, like guys who had some NHL connections. Connor Bedard talks about how valuable it is. Kent Johnson, Andrew Cristal, these guys that take it like to be so valuable. And I wish there was so much more focus on developing those things. But when it comes to ice, like synthetic ice is not the same, but I've also seen situations where teams in Brazil and Colombia use that to train and then go play this one tournament in Florida every year that the Florida Panthers help host. And that's like the only time on the ice. But their experience on the synthetic ice allows them to at least get that experience. And that's, at the very little, just if it opens up more people to play, why not?
I'm just waiting for someone to open up. Like we've seen rinks now, like the way rinks get made now, you don't just make one arena.
Yeah.
It's like a 4-pad and a bar and like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like seems to be the only way you can make it work. I'm really curious to see when someone, and maybe someone has that I'm completely unaware of, probably in the United States, not so much in Canada, takes the plunge and opens up like a 4-pad, 2 ice, 2 synthetic as a complement. And obviously you don't need chillers, no Zamboni, temperature's not as much of a factor. I'm wondering when someone takes that plunge, because one of the main issues that we have in Canada is lack of arenas.
Yeah.
And the last time there was a major initiative to build arenas was Centennial Year, 1967. That's why there are so many Centennial arenas from coast to coast to coast. That's not going to happen again. If anything, it would have to be a marriage of federal funds, private business, sponsors, etc. But as far as like the Canadian government saying we're going to open up rinks all over the country as a way to induce unity from coast to coast, that's not happening. I'm wondering when someone takes the plunge and says we're opening up a quad, 2 synthetic, 2 ice.
It kind of takes it's going to require someone to throw a lot of money at it and knowing it's probably not going to pay off, but it's for the betterment of the sport. And that's the thing, like we've seen at events like this where they'll have shooting pads out here and just opportunities to get people to play. Anything that can get people playing the game. Again, I don't care if it's ball hockey or roller hockey and it looks like someone scored.
Germany just scored.
Oh, so what, 1-1 or 2-1? That's a good sign.
3-1.
3-1. Okay, well, sorry, German, it's not happening today. But when it comes to, just, again, the sport's fun. We love it. We're talking about hockey because we love it. We want as many people playing it. I want to see the people who've got the power to make it happen. Again, like, if the NHL started their own roller hockey league, that'd be awesome.
Listen, man, I'm old enough to remember roller hockey international.
I'm not.
I went to every single Toronto Planets game at Varsity Arena. Dan Daoud, all NHLer, was on that team. Lou Francischetti, and the starting netminder was Manny Legacy. And there were some wonderful names that floated through that league, whether it was Bernie Federico, whether Manuel Rayon played with the New Jersey Rock and Rollers. Jerry St. Cyr would have been the leading scorer there. I'm with you. I would love to see a summer roller hockey league that the NHL or someone gets behind, because I think it's a flat out fun game. Let me end on this one. So a couple of weeks ago, as the World Juniors was sort of approaching, I picked up a book that I haven't read in a long time, and that is Garrett Joyce's When the Lights Went Out. And that's all about the World Junior Hockey Championships in Piashtani, 1987. The Russians playing the Canadians. Major brawl breaks out. Gunter Sabetsky, who would have been the head of the IIHF at that time, making the bold move as the kids are brawling to turn the lights out as a way to get them to stop. Both teams were banished. Canada could have won gold, and like it's a lot of NHLers on the team. I think that junior team, that 87 team, produced more NHL players than any other U20 Canadian junior team ever. Nonetheless, one of the things that got me wondering about, considering how popular this tournament is and how many future NHLers go through it, we don't have any books about this thing. Have you ever wondered, like, aspiring writers, if you're looking for, here's a free topic, here's a free one for you. The history of the World Junior I can already hear the hamster wheel going in your brain right now, Steven, is just saying, Marek, shut up, I'll write this book. Where's the World Junior books?
I was thinking about that literally last night too, before bed. Like
And then
I'm
you
not
woke
kidding.
up thinking about Michael Harabel.
Well, you know, what else are you gonna do? A couple years ago, I started writing just an outline of all the most interesting stories I could
Oh,
find.
so
in
have I
national
just
hockey.
scooped your idea?
Well, no. No. So I wrote a story one year about. It's not World Junior related, but it was about the Pan Am Ice Hockey Tournament, a tournament no one's heard of. Back in 2014, Canada participated in it.
Yeah.
It was mostly like beer league guys, and they went and played. It was against Argentina, Colombia, Mexico. The rink in Mexico was falling apart in the middle of one of their games. The Canadian players took out ladders with their skates, climbed on their ladders, and started like fixing it, like nailing things back into the wall so like they weren't just having boards falling off.
No way.
And I remember the broadcasts were someone's cell phone streams in 2014. They were terrible. But I remember watching these games and thinking, like, this is truly for the love of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And that's more at a grassroots level. But then you go and look at a tournament like the World Juniors, such a big event. You know, if you look at some of the greatest moments, obviously, you know, as Canadians, we'll think about a lot of things like Eberle goal and Mason McTavish a couple years ago. I'd say maybe my favorite World Junior memory was watching Dennis Godla, Slovakia. That was my
Oh, wow.
that was my
yeah.
first World Junior game I think I ever attended. That wasn't a relegation game. And got $4 tickets with my friend. We were sitting in the millionth row and watching him play the game of his life, knowing that probably was never going to play a game anything like that ever again. And he hasn't. He's never really turned into anything much. Watching that and being there to see a young kid's biggest moment, I think, was so special and
John
so incredible.
Slaney for me. What you're describing is John Slaney with the winning goal from Canada.
Like this tournament, it goes deep. You see the stories about the players and things like the unique places they've come from and all that stuff. And there's so many stories that can be told from this great tournament.
I love it. And it got underway a couple of hours ago, and we're off to watch a couple of more games, Finland and Canada later on. Thanks for spending more time with me than you bargained. Really appreciate it.
What else was I going to do right now?
The great. Oh, you probably would have been watching USA Germany. You probably would have already been at Canadian Tire Center. Thanks, pal. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, we'll get Jason York on at another time, I swear. In the meantime, on behalf of Zach Phillips and where is Nick? Where did Nick go? Oh, Nick's gone. Okay, Nick, thanks, buddy, for getting us to air here. Thanks to everyone on the Nation Network for putting this together on short notice here on Boxing Day. We are back tomorrow at FanFest as part of the World Junior Hockey Championships tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. Thanks to everybody in the chats. Rate, review, like, link, spread the word. We're here in Ottawa until New Year's Eve. Enjoy your day. Canada, Finland coming up later. USA, Germany right now. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the sheet. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.